Okay, now that we've talked about vision, now in this chapter, we're going to talk about all of the other senses besides vision and what role they play in your body or how they work. So the first one we're going to discuss is audition, which is your ability to hear. Our hearing alerts us to a lot of information and can help protect us from danger. Humans experience issues with hearing and through sound waves, which are periodic compressions of air, water, and other media. Sound waves vary in amplitude and frequency. When it comes to the psychology of sound, we look at amplitude, which refers to the intensity of the sound wave. And you can see from the chart that we can have low frequency, high frequency, low amplitude, and high amplitude when it comes to our ability to hear sound. Frequency is the number of compressions per second. Timbre is the tone quality of tone complexity. Children are able to hear higher frequencies than adults because as you age, those hair follicles tend to decrease. And our ability to recognize high frequencies diminish as we age because of exposure to loud noises. So people communicate with each other through emotions and alterations in pitch, tone, and timbre. So like you can tell if a person is upset based on the tone of their voice. When it comes to the structures of our ear, there's the pinna. This chart is so hard to see because it's so small. But that is the structure that is flesh and cartilage. It's attached to the side of your head right here. This part of your ear is responsible for altering the reflection of sound into the middle ear and helps us locate the source of sound. Then we have the tympanic membrane, which is a part of the middle ear. It vibrates at the same rates when struck by sound waves, and that is this part right here. Some people, if they look in their ear, they can see it. This is also called your eardrum. It's connected to many tiny bones within your ear. The oval window is the membrane of the inner ear that transfers waves and fluid to the inner ear. We've also got the cochlea, which is the structure that contains 3 fluid-filled tunnels. That's where the hair cells that are responsible for your ability to hear are located. If it's displaced by vibrations in the fluid, that can be excited. So here's like the cochlea. It almost looks like a snail. When it comes to the pitch of sound, we have place theory and frequency theory. Place theory says that each area along the basal membrane has hair cells that are sensitive to only one specific frequency, the place of it. The frequency theory says that the vascular membrane vibrates in synchrony with the sound and produces an action potential at the same frequency. This combines modified versions of the current theory we have combines both of those theories together. Your auditory nerve is going to produce volleys of impulses. Those hearing, when you hear high frequencies, they can sometimes not be understood. The auditory cortex is the primary area for your auditory system. It's the destination for your auditory system. And the auditory cortex is right over here. Each hemisphere receives most of its information from the opposite ear. as everything else in your body works. So your auditory cortex is parallel to your visual cortex. Area A1 is important for auditory imagery. And those axons that lead from the auditory cortex develop less in people who are deaf since birth. Your auditory cortex is not necessary for your hearing, but it is necessary for processing the information you receive, your ears receive. It has a map that has cells that are a part of your primary visual auditory cortex, and that is responsive to certain sounds. Some cells are going to respond to complex sounds, and other cells respond to pure tones. When it comes to the localization of sounds, it's going to depend on comparing the responses of the two ears. You have three cues: sound shadow, time of arrival, and phase difference. Humans are going to localize their low frequency sounds by phase difference and high frequency sounds by loudness. So high frequency sounds are going to be at least 2,000 to 3,000 hertz, and that creates a sound shadow. The difference in time of arrival at the two ears are most useful for localizing the sounds with a sudden onset. Phase differences between the ears are going to provide localization for sounds up to 1,500 hertz. So if this guy is speaking to this woman, her sound shadow is going to exist right back here. This shows us the distance the sound has to travel from where her head is and where the sound shadow is. This here shows us the path of the sound to her left side, and this shows the path to the right side. So this is how you hear when other people speak to you. Amusia is the impaired detection of frequency changes, like somebody who's tone deaf. Around 4% of people experience this. These might be the people who go and audition for American Idol because they believe they're a good singer. They believe when they listen to themselves that they're good at it. It's often associated with thicker than average auditory cortex in the right hemisphere if that occurs, and few connections on the auditory cortex to the frontal cortex. When it comes to pitch, having a perfect pitch is the ability to hear a note and identify it. Most people who are pitch perfect can have a genetic and predisposition and have probably been exposed to musical training from an early age. Many people who speak tonal languages are perfect pitch. Middle ear deafness has to do with the bones of the middle ear failing to transmit sound properly to the cochlea. It can be because of disease, infections, tumors, but can be corrected with surgery or a hearing device. In a normal cochlea, the auditory nerve allows people to hear their own voice clearly. When it comes to nerve or inner ear deafness, that is because of damage to the cochlea, the hair cells, and the auditory nerve. And it can vary from person to person, and it can be confined to one part of the cochlea. This is also something that could be inherited or caused during prenatal development. Tinnitus is frequent or constant ringing in the ear. It could be experienced by people who have nerve damage. It also can occur after damage to the cochlea because those axons in that part aren't responsive to sound the way it should be. And it can be similar to phantom limb pain. It can come and go, the ringing, and can be very detrimental to some people because it's something that is kind of a nuisance. As you age, your hearing tends to decrease. So those brain areas that are responsible for language comprehension can become less active. Many older people will have a decrease in their neurotransmitters in the auditory part of their brain. The attention that you are able to give to something can improve if you watch a speaker's face, like through, lip reading. Oftentimes people can still make out what's being said. And that's everything you need to know about audition, hearing. Now for your mechanical senses. So these are the senses that respond to touch, pressure, bending, or any type of pain or body sensation a person may experience. Audition is a complex mechanical sense because the hair cells are modified touch receptors. The vestibular system is the system that detects the position and movement of the head. It also helps people maintain their balance. The vestibular organ is in the ear and it's adjacent to the cochlea. The vestibular organ consists of 3 semicircular canals, and these are all like jelly-like substances with hair cells that are activated when the head moves. Somatosensation refers to the sensation of the body and its movements, how you sense things around you. Those touch receptors may be an elaborated neuron that's ending, a modified dendrite, a bare ending surrounded by neural cells. Stimulation of those sodium channels can trigger a action potential. So this is a chart that's from your textbook, and it tells us some of those touch sensations that may exist and what's going on. The Pacinian corpuscle is a type of touch receptor that can detect sudden displacement or high frequency vibrations that exist on the skin. Notice from the picture, it's kind of like an onion-like structure that resists gradual or constant pressure. Merkel discs are receptors that respond to light touch, the general stroking of the skin. Men and women generally have the same number of Merkel discs, but women tend to have smaller fingers. When it comes to perception of temperature, it's important for humans to be able to regulate their temperature so that they don't overheat and don't overcool, because those things can be fatal. There are neurons that exist in your body that are cold sensitive and also heat sensitive, and also chemicals that can stimulate receptors for hot and cold that exist within the body. The tickle sensation is often misunderstood. We can't tickle ourselves. If you've ever tried it, go ahead and try to tickle yourself. It's not going to work because your brain will compare that stimulation to expected stimulation because you know it's going to happen. And therefore, it's a weaker response. Somatosensation in the central nervous system. This is kind of telling you how it works. The information from touch receptors enter the head through the central nervous system, and those receptors enter the spinal cord and travel to the brain. So remember, all of those things start in the spinal cord and go up to your brain. Each spinal nerve has a sensory component for touch. The duratome is the body area that's inverted by a single sensory spinal nerve, and sensory information that enters has to be well defined and have a distinct pathway it's supposed to travel down. The somatosensory cortex occurs in various aspects of the body where your sensations all remain separate. Pain is the experience that's evoked by a harmful stimulus and is directed toward one's attention towards danger. Those pain receptors exist in your spinal cord and have to travel to the brain. So those axons that carry pain don't have little or no myelination, so their impulses can travel slow, which is why the pain can seem severe. Mild pain can trigger the release of glutamate in the spinal cord. And those stronger pains can also release glutamate, but then also neuropeptides. When people experience emotional pain, there's a pathway for emotional pain to reach the medulla and then at various other areas of the brain. And research has shown us that when we look at a person who's experiencing emotional pain, hurt feelings are activated in similar pathways as physical pain. Isn't that interesting? When we experience emotional pain, it's perceived by our body in much of the same way. So how do we relieve pain? Opioid mechanisms are sensitive to opiate drugs and similar chemicals, and those opiates can bind to receptors in the spinal cord so that the pain will go away. Endorphins are also a group of chemicals that attach to the brain receptors, and they have the effect of morphine, and that'll make your pain go away. The gate control theory of pain says that the spinal cord has a gate, a hypothetical gate, that if it's closed, you won't experience pain, and if it's open, you will experience pain. People can also relieve pain by a placebo. If you go to your doctor and ask them to give you medicine for pain, and if they give you a sugar pill or a placebo, your brain might sense that that is supposed to work. And so in your mind, it will work. Cannabinoids, which are chemicals that are related to marijuana, can block certain kinds of pains as well. And capsaicin, which produces a temporary burning sensation, can also have an effect on pain. Pain can also be sensitized. That means that mechanisms in your body that have increased sensitivity to pain, certain areas. So you may have damaged tissue, you may have something that's bruised. Those certain receptors can become potentiated after an intense barrage of painful stimuli. So just think of chronic pain experiences, or even think of when you've sort of had a sprain. It can exist for a while. Itch involves the release of histamines under the skin. There are various parts of your body that are activated and also send the message from your spinal cord to your brain. Pain and itch have an inhibitory relationship. Opioids are going to increase an itch, while antihistamines are going to decrease an itch. When it comes to the chemical senses, that has to do with your sense of smell. It allows animals to find food and then also avoid danger. The sense of taste has one simple function: to tell us whether we should swallow something or spit it out. It's to protect you from eating a substance that could be harmful. We like things that taste sweet, especially when we're in the infants. We dislike bitter and sour, but maybe we'll take it a little bit. And we vary in our likes of salty flavors. Taste and smell go together. Taste refers to the stimulation of the taste buds, which are receptors that exist on your tongue, and your perception of flavor is a combination of your ability to taste it, but then also to smell it. Those axons converge in the cortex to help you be able to smell. People who do not have a sense of smell also can't taste as well as they would be able to if they could smell. Receptors for taste are actually modified skin cells, and those taste receptors have excitable membranes that release neurotransmitters. Your taste receptors are replaced every 10 to 14 days naturally by your body. Papal and taste buds are structures on the surface of the tongue that contain those taste buds. There could be 10 or more taste buds that exist in each papal. Each taste bud contains approximately 50 receptors, and they're located around the outer edges of your tongues. In Western cultures, we traditionally describe our taste buds as sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Those are our primary taste buds. And then we have 4 types of taste receptors. Some substances that can modify taste are miracle berries and then also tea. When it comes to an adaptation, this refers to reduced perception of a stimuli due to fatigue of those receptors. So your body is going to become used to something and it will adapt to it. Cross-adaptation refers to the reduced response to one stimuli after you're exposed to something else, so it crosses over. For your taste perception, although we say that the main tastes are sweet, sour, salty, and bitter, researchers believe there is a 5th taste, which is umami or savory. Okay? Some people believe that the savory sense is our ability to taste fats. The saltiness receptors permit sodium ions across the membrane, and it results in an action potential. Sour receptors detect the presence of acids and can activate G protein. Bitter receptors are associated with a wide range of dissimilar substances that are toxic. There are about 25 different types of bitter receptors that are sensitive to a wide range of chemicals, which vary in level of toxicity. When your brain codes your tasting, those taste nerves are projected to the medulla and part of the nucleus. Then various areas of the brain can activate the somatosensory cortex so that it will respond, so that touch and taste can kind of interact. Each hemisphere of your brain is responsible for working with the tongue. People from various parts of the country differ in their taste sensitivity. Genetic factors and then also hormones can account for our taste variations. That's why people in various parts of the world eat different foods. Some super tasters, those are people who are highly sensitive to taste. They cannot eat certain foods. Women can have hypersensitivity to taste while they're pregnant, but they also have higher sensitivity to smell when they're pregnant as well. Olfaction is your sense of smell. It has to do with the detection and recognition of chemicals that exist in your nose. It's critical in most mammals for finding foods and mating and avoiding danger. Scent selection, it occurs when humans have to follow a certain scent. You can get better at it as you start to practice. It's important for food selection. We're going to go towards food that smells good to us. Most of what we think has to do with taste is actually because of olfaction, because they go together. When it comes to social behavior, people tend to prefer the smell of romantic partners who smell different from themselves and their family members. This decreases the possibility of inbreeding and increases the probability of children having a wide range of immunities. Now, people don't naturally think about that, but that's what's going on with them mentally. The olfactory receptors line the olfactory epithelium in the rear part of the nose. And that's right down here. Those olfactory receptors are located on cilia, which extend from the cell body into the mucous surface of the nasal passage. Vertebrates have higher forms of olfactory receptors than others. Proteins and olfactory receptors help respond to chemicals that are outside the cells and can trigger changes in G protein. In the brain, various axons from the olfactory receptors carry information to the olfactory bulb. Those chemicals that exist for smell can be excited in neighboring areas, and the olfactory bulb will send those axons to the cerebral cortex where messages are coded by location. If the olfactory sense is damaged, those receptors will be replaced approximately every month because they're vulnerable to damage because of the contact people come in with the air. Individuals can differ in their sense of olfaction. Women can detect odor more readily than men, and some people have a different threshold for detecting a faint smell. Pheromones are chemicals that are released by pheromones, animals, to affect the behavior of others of the same species. They're important for mammals. They're less important for humans, but humans can unconsciously respond to pheromones through receptors in the olfactory mucosa, which, synchronization of menstrual cycles for women. Many women who have exposure to each other will have similar menstrual cycles because their brains have unconsciously smelled the other woman. Synesthesia is the experience of one sense in response to stimulation of a different sense, like seeing a number or a letter as a specific color. It tends to happen in clusters of families that also have perfect pitch. They have a genetic predisposition to that. And that is everything I need you to know about all of the other senses.